Hey guys, today I am checking in from my office and I wanted to talk to you guys about the three things that I see parents do with their kids who have eating disorders that are not helpful. And again, I just want to preface this by saying that I think a lot of parents have really good intentions and care a ton about their kids and can still be susceptible to making these errors. So don't be too hard on yourself if you're doing one of these things because a lot of the things that come with a kiddo having an eating disorder aren't like inherently natural, and even in the common culture there are things that might be okay or more acceptable. And but when you're living with a kiddo who has an eating disorder, it's all the more important that you do behave in ways that are counterculture sometimes because um, they're healthier. And yeah, I'm not gonna like go too far down that rabbit hole, but I just want you to give yourself some grace that if you are doing any of these things, it's okay. And just try to do your best to kind of figure things out from there. Okay, so number one, the biggest thing that I see is parents who are still kind of engaging and talking about their own diets or their own eating behaviors, um, or talking about their body image, and so in a negative way. And so I'd really encourage that if you are dieting outside of like for completely medical reasons, because I've had kiddos who have parents, with diabetes or some other things where they kind of have to be a bit more cognizant of what they're eating, that you really try to not do that around your kiddo. And honestly, if you can eliminate that kind of restrictive eating from your life, I would encourage it, because it's really tough for you to say, oh, hey, you go get therapy and work on this stuff, but here I am. I'm going to continue the dieting culture in the house. Or, I want you to love how you look, but then I'm kind of, giving myself a hard time in the mirror or talking about, my weight or fitting into clothes. And so that's kind of like one that I see happen a lot where, just not making comments about your own appearance and making that just kind of like the significant thing in people's lives where it really isn't significant. And remembering that a lot of people with eating, not everybody, but a lot of people with eating disorders, they really hone in on that information. So like when you say those things, it's going to impact them a lot more than the average person who, knows that it's nice to take care of yourself and look good, but that's not the end all be all of who we are. Whereas a lot of eating disorders, they organize themselves around that idea that how I look, my weight, is so incredibly important when it really isn't. The second thing, so this might sound a little bit weird, but the second thing I see parents do most commonly that's an error is get too hyper focused on talking about the food and numbers with their kiddos instead of checking in on how they're feeling and how they're doing. So a lot of parents get really scared and anxious, as I can understand, especially when their kiddo is um, really not doing so well and like really struggling with food. But their way of dealing with that is that they kind of become hyper focused on their food and trying to control it. And now, for some kids, especially if they're older, this can be really tough because you can unintentionally get into like this power struggle with your kiddo. And part of what might be fueling their behaviors is actually the fact that they're kind of rebelling against you. It's the one area that they get to kind of control. And so the more that you try to control it and the more you try to like hyper focus on what they're eating, how much they're purging, all of those other things, it can make it worse. And so I just encourage you that if you find that you're kind of obsessing over your kiddo's eating disorder, that and like the actual like the amounts, the calories, and like trying to really control how they eat yourself, that you see and talk to your therapist about if that's actually a helpful behavior or not. Now, in some circumstances, it actually can be helpful. And again, I won't go into that, but I've seen it a lot of the time where it's not. I really encourage you to, when you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm just really worried about my kiddo and I kind of want to like check in about their behaviors, that you ask them things like, how are you feeling today? Like, let's check in about what's going on in your life, or trying to kind of focus on the other areas of their life so they can kind of slowly build trust with you and open up about other things going on. So the communication between the two of you isn't just about the eating disorder, that you are showing to them that there's so much more to talk about. There's other hard things, there's other emotions, and that you can connect with them outside of that, because that's really important. And then the third thing that I see parents do that they think is helpful, or maybe they don't realize is not helpful, is, it's tough because there's, like, I was trying to narrow this list down, and I was like, oh, I came up with the 3, and now I'm kind of struggling to narrow it down. But I would say one of the things I'd really encourage is getting involved in your kiddo's recovery. I see a lot of parents or even siblings kind of take a distancing position because it can feel very overwhelming, confusing, and helpless to honestly be living with somebody with an eating disorder. And so sometimes that's the way that people know how to handle it, is they kind of withdraw, or they'll say things like just eat and get kind of frustrated with the person. I see the best, or I'd say the quickest results, and the best outcomes with kiddos whose families are involved and are willing to either engage in their own therapy work or family therapy, and are really open to that process. I always try to have, especially with my adolescents and kiddos, I always try to have the family sessions happen at least every couple of sessions, because I've just seen how much it helps for their family system to be involved. And I know that it can be very tempting to be like, hey, this is my kid's problem, just, fix them, let them kind of figure this out. And, I know that there are parts that are totally their responsibility and that they're working on, and the family is still a system. And so it's super helpful for the system to work together to heal this, because it's a lot harder for them, especially as teenagers who are still kind of developing their brains and figuring things out, or even younger, to do this all on their own. And so I'd really just encourage that you get involved as much as you can without, getting to the point where you're trying to control it. But being involved in the therapy process and just showing them that you care and that you know that they're not alone in their struggle and struggling with things in life in general. I think that can just be, I've seen a lot of kids feel like, okay, if like I'm the problem kid and my parents are perfect and it's just my issue. And when things are framed that way, healing doesn't happen quite as quickly, because that's usually not exactly the full picture. But that isn't to say like, hey, you're a bad parent and like you need to, do all this stuff because you're a bad parent. It's just to have the system working together for the greater good versus that kiddo doing it by themselves. So yeah, if you can, I know a lot of parents have a ton of, they might be busy at work, but when you can, try to make it to those sessions and try to be involved in this process. Okay, that's the top 3 that I have for you guys today, and it was good chatting. I'll talk with you later.